Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. I had just purchased a quaint low cottage in the countryside and was so excited to move in. It was set back on a wooded lot and gave me the peace and privacy I had been craving after years in the bustling city. The first few weeks, they were blissful. I loved sitting on the porch watching the birds or stargazing from my backyard at night. The place needed some minor fixes here and there, but it felt like my perfect cozy home. About a month after moving in, I decided to do some redecorating in my bedroom. As I was taking down the mirror that hung over my dresser, I noticed a strange hollowed-out rectangular mark on the wall behind it. At first glance, I assumed it was just some damage in the old plaster wall. But the more I looked at it, the more uniform and deliberate it seemed. My curiosity got the better of me, so I decided to gently push on the marked section of the wall just to see. To my surprise, it actually gave way slightly under my touch. Pushing a little harder, a panel of the wall popped open, revealing a gaping dark space behind it. Stunned, I peered inside and felt a cold draft of air hiss out. It appeared there was a full hidden room back there. I hesitated before slowly shining a light inside. As the beam illuminated the swirling dust, I saw a small enclosed room no more than 4 meters square with cold cement floors and walls. But what caught my eye was a large, imposing metal chair with thick leather restraints that sat in the center. It looked disturbingly similar to an electric chair, though even more archaic and menacing with its rusty iron frame, sinister leather straps, and iron spikes protruding from the arms and leg rests. A deep chill went down my spine as I realized this was some kind of old torture chamber or interrogation room, hidden away from sight. My mind raced with numerous terrifying thoughts about who could have built this and what twisted purposes it may have served over the years. There were no records or any signs that had indicated this cottage's dark history when I purchased it. The space was so cleverly concealed behind the false wall that I likely never would have known about its existence if that panel hadn't suspiciously come loose at my touch. But now that I had found it, I agonized over what to do next. Part of me considered just closing up the creepy hidden wall and pretending I'd never discovered the horrors lurking within. I could plaster and paint over it, shutting out this nightmare as if it didn't exist beneath my own house. But my morbid curiosity overruled my better judgment. I convinced myself there must be some innocuous reason for its existence. Perhaps it had once been used for cold food storage or meat curing, and had merely acquired a creepy aesthetic over the decades of abandonment. I became obsessed with photographing the sinister chair and room from every angle, yet resisted setting foot inside. At night, I pored over the images, futilely trying to decipher clues in the stains on the floor and gashes in the chair's wood and leather. By the harsh light of day, I half convinced myself it was simply an eccentric holdover from a past owner's interest in antiquities. But when alone at night, my mind spun disturbing visions of anguished prisoners chained there as some dark form of punishment or experimentation. Over the next few weeks, I continued going about life as normal, but felt myself growing more paranoid. I started noticing strange noises around the house at night that I convinced myself were just the old wood settling. But I couldn't shake the icy tingling feeling of being watched at all times now. It was like just knowing about the secret torture room had opened a dark portal into this house's past that I could no longer ignore. Eventually, my curiosity outweighed my apprehension again, and I decided to do some research on the house's history, something I should have done before buying. I discovered my cottage had been owned in the early 1900s by a man named Johann Krieg, a German doctor who had fled to the remote countryside. Very little was known about him or his medical practice. The few black and white photos found showed an imposing, harsh-looking man. The more I read, the more convinced I became that Johann had surely used that hidden underground space for sinister experiments or torturous medical procedures. It all made sense. The secluded location, soundproof secret room, restraint chair. This house had likely hosted many disturbing horrors. I became obsessed with finding out everything I could about Johann's work, spending hours every night scouring history books and microfiche newspaper archives. The deeper I dug, the more unsettled I felt actually living above the very room where it likely took place. I started hearing phantom screams at night and could swear I smelled burning flesh inside at times. I couldn't tell if I was imagining things, succumbing to paranoia from learning my house's likely violent past, or if some dark energy still lingered there. Part of me knew I should have the room sealed off for good, but another part became oddly protective of the secrets it held, as if I was now the keeper of this house's dark history. Powerless to stop my downward obsession, I inevitably found myself drawn to that false wall panel again, tempted to unlock the answers. I'm still living here, possibly gone mad from some malevolent force, or perhaps just acknowledging the evil that once walked these halls. Either way, I've learned that some doors are better left unopened. My husband Tom and I had just moved into a beautiful old Victorian house in the countryside. It needed some minor updates, but was full of charm, with intricate woodwork, a turret room, and stained glass windows. On our first night there, we ordered takeout and explored the place excitedly like kids. Inside a dusty storage closet, we found a large antique statue of an angel with lifelike features and finely carved draped robes. She was quite stunning, with intricately chiseled hair, eyes that seemed to follow you, and finely etched feathered wings extending down her back. We figured the impressive statue had simply been left behind by the previous owners, so we decided to keep her. Tom carefully carried the remarkably heavy stonework over to the living room, and we positioned her facing the corner by the ornate fireplace. With her graceful pose and serene expression, she seemed to fit perfectly there, like she was meant to overlook and bless our new home. The first week there, we were busy unpacking boxes and arranging the furniture how we liked it in each room. Late one night, after a long day of redecorating the master bedroom, we finally collapsed into bed, exhausted. The next morning, when I groggily went downstairs to the living room, I instantly noticed something was off. The angel statue had moved from her spot in the corner and was now facing forward a few feet to the left, as if curiously peering out into the room. My first thought was that Tom must have gone down early and relocated it there for some reason. But when I asked him over coffee, he vehemently insisted he hadn't touched the statue at all since we initially positioned it. We thoroughly checked the entire living room for any tremors or vibrations during the night that could have shifted the incredibly heavy stonework, but the old house had been still as a grave. There were no signs the thick, sturdy oak pedestal had swayed even an inch. I scrutinized the statue's new position and found no scrape marks on the hardwood floors from where it had seemingly slid itself over or pivoted during the night. For the life of me, I could not figure out how something so heavy could have moved on its own. Still, seeing the angel there peering out mysteriously in a new spot sent an inexplicable chill down my spine in that moment. Tom suggested I must be imagining things in my groggy early morning state. He reasoned the statue could not possibly have moved, and that the dim dawn light filtering in through the curtains was simply playing tricks on my eyes. As much as I trusted my own perception, there was no rational explanation we could deduce. With no proof besides my shaky gut feeling, we resolved to ignore the oddity as a case of forgetfulness or disorientation after just waking. I poured myself some coffee, hoping the caffeine might shake off the unsettled feeling gnawing at me. We busied ourselves with other move-in tasks, and I put the angel's mysterious repositioning out of mind for the rest of the bustling day. But some lingering doubt nagged at me. I couldn't shake the ominous apprehension that had gripped me in that moment, seeing the statue there askew, as if something was very off in our cherished new home. I resolved to pay closer attention to the statue and its precise placement just to reassure myself. However, over the next week, the angel statue kept moving on its own volition in subtle ways. Some mornings it would be facing a slightly different direction, as if scanning the room. Other times it mysteriously seemed closer to the couch than originally placed, its robes just barely brushing the cushion. Tom and I were perplexed, unable to explain the statue's autonomous movement. We took photos each night to track the changes. I began dreading going downstairs in the mornings, filled with fear imagining what new position the angel would be found in that day. We searched the pedestal for hidden wheels, but found nothing. Tom secured it in place with braces and locks, but somehow each morning the statue still managed to move. I felt both fascinated and frightened by the strange phenomenon occurring in our new home. We started researching the history, thinking perhaps restless spirits were at play, but we found no stories of death or trauma linked to the house or land. My imagination ran wild with supernatural theories, from ghosts to temporal portals, but Tom remained practical, insisting there must be some rational explanation we just hadn't figured out yet. But over the next month, Neither science nor spirituality seemed to provide answers as the angel's subtle dance continued. While she seemed serene in stillness, I began to find her beautiful but blank gaze unsettling, as if she could see right through me. Each time she mysteriously transported through our home, she seemed to take on an air of malevolence. Friends suggested we get rid of her, but I was oddly compelled to keep the statue at this point. I needed to understand what force compelled her creeping movement across our floors. Tom finally had enough and demanded we lock her in the basement to put an end to the bizarre incident, for the sake of our own sanity if nothing else. But even that concrete vault couldn't contain her. The pitter-patter of bare feet still haunts me at night. Moving into that spacious new rental flat last year initially seemed like a dream come true for my girlfriend and me. But our neighbor from hell who lived in the unit next door soon turned living there into a never-ending nightmare of bizarre harassment and spying. No matter how much we pleaded for just normalcy and peace, the relentless creepy knocking and leering through the peephole never stopped during the entire duration of our lease. It was a traumatic ordeal that truly taught me evil can hide silently behind any closed door or seemingly smiling face, waiting for the perfect chance to emerge and completely shatter your sense of safety and normalcy. My girlfriend and I were so excited when we first landed the larger quarter flat in a high-rise downtown, hitting our first real independence finally in our mid-20s. After years of cramped, dingy apartments, having this bright, spacious place with big windows and our own little balcony overlooking the river felt amazing. On move-in day, we were absolutely giddy, laughing and dreaming out loud about how we decorate our first real home together as we slowly hauled box after box up from the rental van. The future felt so full of freedom and possibility. This was supposed to be a joyful new chapter for us away from parental supervision. In that moment, everything genuinely felt perfect. That optimistic bubble burst almost instantly, however, once we reluctantly met the older guy living in the unit next door. As we were lugging boxes down the hall, he crept to open his door and peeked his head out, introducing himself with an overly enthusiastic smile as Mark and explaining he lived in Unit 12. We politely muttered hello under the weight of our things, but I could immediately sense us both getting strange, uneasy vibes from the way this Mark guy eyed us up and down intently, almost hungrily as he made small talk. He seemed oddly excited about the new, hot young couple moving into the building, going on about how much fun we'd all have getting to know each other. My girlfriend and I just awkwardly nodded along, then hurried into our own place and shut the door firmly behind us, breathing a sigh of relief thinking the awkward encounter was over. In retrospect, I wish I had trusted my instincts, screaming that something felt very wrong and concerning about this man. But we initially brushed off the vague creeping discomfort as just the typical awkwardness of meeting new neighbors. We assumed Mark was probably just lonely and curious about the new tenants moving onto his floor, overeager to make new friends. No big deal, we reasoned. Surely he'd calm down eventually and just keep to himself, once the novelty of having fresh neighbors wore off. But over the next week, our unease only amplified as Mark started going out of his way to creepily ingratiate himself to us whenever we passed by him coming or going. He began inventing thin excuses multiple times a day to knock on our door just to chat about mundane, trivial things, preventing us from ever fully settling in. The overly friendly, familiar way Mark spoke to us felt wrong. He had no boundaries, asking invasive questions about our work schedules, relationships history, family issues, and other inappropriate personal topics way beyond small neighborly talk. When we tried to redirect the conversations elsewhere, he'd just dig in more persistently. Soon his harassment graduated to the next level of insanity. At all hours, Mark would start angrily banging on the walls we shared if he ever overheard laughter, music, or really any sounds of life coming from our flat. He'd pound aggressively and yell at us to keep it down in there, even when we were just having a normal conversation at a reasonable volume. Other times in the absolute dead of night, he'd bang on the front door and pretend to warn us about hearing strange noises or people lurking outside. We'd peek through the peephole to see him just standing there smirking. The complete lack of self-awareness was chilling. Our home no longer felt like a peaceful sanctuary. The final straw came when I caught sight of Mark's eyeball pressed right up against a peephole, blatantly leering into our open doorway anytime we left or entered. The knowledge that he was voyeuristically spying on all our private comings and goings made our stomachs turn. We felt indescribably violated and unsafe, Our cozy haven now felt claustrophobic, more like a prison cell with a deranged warden closely monitoring our every daily activity. In desperation, we brought the harassment to our landlord's attention, urging him to address the bizarre situation. But though he spoke sternly to Mark and told him to give us space, it unfortunately only caused the unhinged man's intimidation to escalate even further. Mark retaliated by skulking around, waiting for me alone by my car in the garage or the mail area. In the hall, he'd make sudden loud banging sounds just to toy with our nerves, and he took to muttering things angrily under his breath whenever we had to squeeze past him. My poor girlfriend was an anxious wreck, refusing to stay home alone anymore to avoid him. Despite multiple stern police reports over the weeks for harassment and intimidation, the authorities essentially told us they could not arrest or restrain Mark solely over vague noise complaints, even though this was clearly a severe case of targeted harassment. We felt frustrated and helpless, violated by this unpredictable, obsessed maniac forcing his way sorely into our lives against our will. In one final desperate move to regain some control over the nightmarish situation Mark's sick fixation had created, we actually broke our lease early and hastily found another apartment halfway across town, not even telling the landlord where we were going. We knew the risk of Mark somehow tracking us down at the new place was still very real and terrifying to consider, but that ominous prospect actually felt preferable to remaining trapped under his disturbing magnifying glass another single day. By the end, we were both nervous, depressed wrecks at the thought that this man was still always right on the other side of the wall, just biding his time. For the first couple months after we relocated, I still had frequent vivid nightmares about hearing Mark violently pounding on our new front door and terrorizing us again. A big part of me truthfully wanted to look into moving to a different city or even state just to guarantee we'd never lay eyes on him anywhere again. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.